Hey everyone, so we've talked about using pre and post faders before, but let's talk about using pre and post fader sends specifically today. So this video is actually a request from a Patreon patron, so thank you so much for the request, Tori, and let's get started here. Oh, and before I get distracted and get into it, I just wanted to thank my friend Evan. This session here is from her upcoming album. We're working on it right now, so the vocals you're going to hear are actually scratch vocals. So the band is called Evan Diamond and the Library, and I will have links to some of their already released stuff in the description below if you want to check it out. So thank you to Evan and her band for letting me use this example. All right, so first we have to talk about what a send is, just to lay some groundwork here. So if I go up in my edit window to this drop down here, I can actually add sends by clicking on either of these options here. We have sends A through E in Pro Tools and sends F through J. They're just placeholders for adding sends. And as you can see here, I have a bunch of sends already made. So you can access them here in the edit window, or you can also do Command equals to switch over to the mix window and you can access your sends here. If you don't see your sends here in the mix window, you can go to this drop down on the bottom left corner of your screen and you can make them display or hide with this drop down. So basically, if you're looking at the mix window specifically, you can imagine the audio traveling down through this channel here. So for each track, it goes from top to bottom. So it goes down through your inserts. This is where we add plugins and effects. And then it comes down to your sends. And all a send is it's Pro Tools making a copy of your audio and sending it somewhere else. So it's just like a fork in the road. One path continues down along this track and the other path goes somewhere else. So right now I have some sends. These sends are actually for my headphone units. So this is going outside of Pro Tools to my headphone, the brain for my headphone system. But you can also make internal routing with your sends by just adding a bus, for example. So you can just pick bus numbers and then have other tracks receive that specific send. So if I go ahead and click on this bus 910 option here for this send, it goes ahead and it creates that send. Right now I don't think I have anything receiving that send, but it is there. And you can open up the window for the actual send here. So here's my window. I'm just dragging it around. You can hide and display it. It's still there whether or not the window is showing. And you can hold Option and click on it to have it go to a 0 value. So that means there's no change. You're sending out, your send is going out with no raise in volume and no lowering of the volume. So no raising of the decibel level and no lowering of the decibel level. So I like to hold Option and click on the fader to make sure I'm sending some signal out just to start with. And let me just close this out and get rid of this send. And one common way that we tend to use sends, I'm going to use this as my example. One common way that we tend to use sends is to create something like a reverb aux track. So I'm going to go ahead and create an aux track. So Command Shift N. I'm going to do Command right arrow to make my track a stereo track. And then I'm going to do the Command down arrow to switch to the aux input option. So you can do left and right arrows. You can do up and down to choose the different options here. I want a stereo aux input track. So I'm going to hit enter and it creates my aux. And then I'm going to call this reverb. And so this might be handy, for example, if you have a bunch of drum tracks, a bunch of drum mics, you might want to send them all out the same send so that they get summed together. And then you have something like a reverb on this track, and that basically glues all the microphones together before adding whatever the reverb is that you want to add. I'm going to do Valhalla Supermassive because I like it. And another example of this might be in film, for example. You might want a bunch of different microphones, a bunch of different sound sources that are within your sound design, within your soundscape to sound like they're all in the same physical space. So you might send them all out the same send to a reverb track. So there are different ways that you can do this, but I'm just using this as an example. There are a million other ways to use sends, not just creating a reverb track, just so you guys know. I'm going to close this for now. So let's say I want to send this vocal track out through this reverb track. I just moved it so that you can see this more easily, see them next to each other. But basically all you want to do is set a send, right? So bus, let me just pick one. I think maybe 13 and 14 is not being used. A lot of those were not being used. This is the beginning. We're just starting this session, so it's may or may not be the best example here. But I'm going to hold Option and click on this. So now it's sending out some signal. So here's my send, and then I'm going to have this aux track receive that send. So bus 13, 14. And I like to hold Command and click on the S to solo safe my aux tracks. That's just something that I tend to do. It makes it so that if you solo the tracks that are leading to it, it doesn't soft mute the aux and make it so you can't hear it. So basically within the send window, you can drag it around if you want. And there's a button right here. It says pre. So this is where we choose between pre and post fader when it's within a send. So if you click it here and it's highlighted blue, it is now in pre fader mode. And if you deselect it, so click it again, it is now in post fader mode. So that's where you choose whether or not you're in pre or post fader on a send. And you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to put my headphones on here so I can hear what I'm doing as well. And so basically, let me find a section here where her vocals are going. These are just scratch vocals, so be nice. But basically, what this means here is if I have pre-fader on and I adjust the actual level for the main fader, it will not affect the level that's sent out to my reverb, to my aux track through the send. It will not affect the level that's sending out through the send. Whereas if I have this on post fader and I adjust this main fader level, drag it around, that is going to now adjust and affect that level that's being sent out through that send. So I'm just going to show you guys that really quickly. So I'm just going to hit play on this little chunk here.
A photo album is filled with destruction in the name of the Lord, and your reckless.
So you can see how since it's in post fader, it's not in pre fader. When I drag this main fader down, it stops the level that's going out through the send as well. So post fader means that the signal is affected by the actual fader, right? So it's post fader is what the signal level is that's being sent out. Now, if I switch this to pre fader, I'm going to bring this back up for our starting point. You'll see that as I adjust this main fader, it is not affecting this. So this is being sent out before the fader, pre-fader, so before this main fader. So I'm just going to hit play again. Let me highlight my section here.
A photo album is filled with destruction.
See that? So you can see it's still sending out that level the same as it was when this was all the way up. So that's the basic idea between pre and post fader and ascend. But there are a few other things that it's good to keep in mind when you're using this. And by the way, I didn't dial this in, so this is like a really weird sound to have here. But I just wanted to show you guys the example. So basically the cliff notes here is that your main fader, your main track fader will only affect your send levels if you're in post fader. If you're in pre-fader, it doesn't affect those send levels at all, and it would then defer to this fader here. And that's something to differentiate between here is the fader that's actually on your send and the one that's on your main fader. You'll notice as I move this around, it does not affect the send fader. There are two separate faders. It's not like how your volume automation will affect the main fader here. They are not linked. They are not the same thing at all. So basically, your send fader here will always affect your send levels. So it is slightly different than your main fader, which only affects it again based on if you're in pre or post fader. So let's just watch that in action here. So I'm going to switch to post fader first, and I'm going to highlight my section here.
A photo album is filled with destruction in the name of the Lord, and your reckless devotion I must commend.
So you can see how as I drag that around, that affects the level that's sent to the reverb, right? Similarly, if I go to pre and I now drag this around, it's still going to affect it. It's not like when we're in pre with the main fader. So let me just show you that.
A photo album is filled with destruction in the name of the Lord, and your reckless devotion I must commend. Stuck to your gun.
So hopefully that makes sense. Keep in mind that these are slightly different. These faders are slightly different and they function slightly differently as a result. So what are some use cases for this? Well, sometimes, for example, I might want to make a really big reverb wash sound. So sometimes that's in music, sometimes it's for a sound design element. I'll just want some kind of really big washy reverb to kind of take over. And a lot of times when I want that to happen, I personally will sometimes reduce that dry signal and I'll want to kind of just let that big washy reverb take over as the dry signal diminishes. The balance changes over time. And so in that case, I will often do pre-fader because then, I can have this going out at a good healthy level and build up that wash, that reverb wash, and I can slowly reduce this here. and it won't affect my reverb. So then I can have that big healthy reverb that's still going as the dry signal fades out, or as the dry signal is completely cut off, as the case may be. It just depends on what I'm doing. So basically, if I want them to operate independently, the dry signal and the wet signal, and this goes for other effects too, not just reverb, right? Then I will often leave this send in pre-fader metering. So then the question is, when might I use post fader, right? So oftentimes when I use post fader, it might be for something, for example, if I want it to sound more realistic, more like a realistic reverb, like they're actually in a physical space. This is good for film scenes, stuff like that. Or if I want it to be just sound more realistic, then I might want this main fader to actually be linked to my reverb, right? So as I'm decreasing the volume on the main fader, I might want the signal that's being sent to the reverb to decrease as well. Because if they were in a real physical space, the volume of the dry signal, right, the actual sound source, would affect the reverb. So if you want it to sound a little bit more realistic, you might want to keep it in post fader. And another thing to keep in mind here is that when you're in post fader metering, it's not just this fader here that can affect the send level. So for example, let me show you if I mute my track. So I'm going to hit play, I'm going to mute this, and you'll see how it cuts off the signal to my send as well. So let me just do that. See that? You see how it faded out there pretty quickly? So if I, for example, might want to take things in and out of the mix quickly, maybe to A/B test things or, compare. Sometimes I like to just take something out of a mix temporarily while I'm mixing, while I'm working on something. And if you want to be able to do that really quickly by just muting the track, then you might want to leave it in post fader because you might want that to also take out the reverb as well. It's kind of annoying sometimes if you don't have this going and you want to hit mute and mute this whole sound source and everything associated with it, and the reverb keeps going. That can be kind of annoying because then you either have to hit it separately or group things. There's a few other ways to deal with that. But if you're in post fader metering for your send and you mute the actual track, it will also mute that reverb for you. So that's kind of nice. It'll mute, whatever the processing is that you have it sent to. So again, not just reverb, but that's another use case. So, I tend to use it in post fader metering if I kind of want everything to be treated as one cohesive package here, if that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, that's about it. There's no hard and fast rule. You kind of just have to suss it out. And a lot of times I don't have a concrete reason for why I use pre or post fader. I just kind of end up falling into one as I go, as I'm working, depending on how I tend to be using it. I don't necessarily know which one I'm going to fall into ahead of time, though. So it is something you have to suss out. And, there's no hard and fast rule. A lot of you guys might disagree with me on how you would use things. I don't know. There's a million ways to do anything in Pro Tools. This is me just hedging what I'm saying. But this is how I tend to use things. I hope you guys like that. I hope someone finds it interesting and helpful. Let me know what you think in the comments below. As always, like, comment, subscribe, hit the notification bell. I'd appreciate all of that stuff. And I do have a Patreon. So it's patreon.com/CatoNoise. We're doing a book club right now where we're going over Bobby Owsinski's workbook in our Discord server. We have the Discord server that we're all hanging out on. It's a lot of fun, and I believe it's only like $1 a month at the minimum if you want to join. So feel free to check that out. And other than that, I come out with new videos every Wednesday, and thank you so much for hanging out. Okay. That's something to different. I don't know what to talk about. I haven't washed my hair in like 4 or 5 days, and I don't know what to talk about. Oh, I'm going to try these. I got some of these. I'll show you guys. They're for drums, so they just kind of help damp the drum head a little bit if you like that sound. But they're from Evans. I'll put a link in the description, I guess, if you want to try them out. But they're just like gels. It's like the Moon gels, kind of, but they're like a little firmer than the Moon gels, like from what I remember. I haven't touched Moon gels in a little while, but they're a lot softer from what I remember. These are a little more firm. I can say it. Anyway, the pack comes with these 4, and then one of these big ones and a couple little ones. So yeah, I'm gonna go try these out next. I think I haven't tried them yet. And then something that I did try out recently that I got that I'm pretty excited about. I got these, it's from Ultimate Support is what they're called. I'm not really familiar with this company, but I got these quick release attachments for microphones. So one of the studios I used to work in here in San Diego had something like this. It was a little different, but they were so handy because you don't have to be screwing mics on and off your mic stands. So with this, there's another part. This one actually is on one right now, so you can see it right here. And you pull this in and it quick releases the microphone. I can actually kind of show you. So the parts that screw on stay screwed on both the microphone side and the mic stand side. What I think I'll do is I'll mute this in post so it's not really annoying, but you just lift this up. There it is. It's a quick release. So you just pull the sleeve back to release it and to attach it. So I've been pretty pumped about those. I'm just ordered more, so I have more on the way right now. I've been really happy with them. They're pretty cool. They save you a lot of time, and it's probably good for, like, some of these mics, like, I think my 906 has, like, a plastic threading, I think. One of my mics does, and I'm just really nervous about, using that over and over and screwing it on and off mic stands over and over, and the longevity of the mic when you consider that, because the ones that aren't metal like this, I'd worry about it over time, so, yeah, that's my new exciting little thing that I've gotten in my studio. I'm pretty pumped about it. Okay. Talk to you guys later.